The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
We're going to get started in just a minute. I see a lot of people still logging in. Welcome to the Assessment Tax and Land Records webinar series. Today's topic for discussion is configuring dashboards. I'm Brent Jones. I'm part of the Land Records team here at Esri, and I'll be your host. We have presenting with us JD Overton today, who's also part of the Land Records team. At any time during the webinar today, if you have a question, feel free to submit it through the GoToWebinar chat window. We'll try to do our best to address your questions during and at the end of the presentation. Here's a quick look at the agenda for today's webinar. I'll begin with a quick overview of the ArcGIS solution for assessment, tax, and land records, and then JD will give us an overview of the operations dashboard. We'll cover what it is, how you get it, and what are the key capabilities. We'll then spend most of the time doing demos and showing you examples of configuring dashboards. We'll then conclude the webinar discussing how you can deploy the value analysis dashboard, which is a completely configurable solution from our suite of local government apps. GIS has many core capabilities, from comprehensive spatial analysis, advanced cartography, data sharing, publication, web mapping, and a whole lot more. Not everyone's a GIS expert, so to make these capabilities accessible to everyone, we've taken these core capabilities and developed some focused apps to deliver a pre-configured solution focused on assessment, tax, and land records operations. These are key public data. These key areas are public data access, value analysis, appeals defense, field operations, and parcel management. I think everybody knows the capabilities of ArcGIS and parcel management, but the other areas are lesser known. That's why we're having these webinars. You may have seen the recent Fair and Equitable magazine from IAAO. They just conducted a GIS survey that's worth taking a look at. It's also notable that the focus of IAAO's annual conference is mapping the way to innovation, and our own Jack Dangerman is keynoting in Minneapolis in September. Today we're going to focus on what may be one of the most underutilized GIS capabilities in the assessor's office, dashboards. We'll discuss the ArcGIS operations dashboard configured for assessors so you can instantly get answers to ongoing questions. There are more components of the dashboard of the solution that we'll cover in upcoming webinars. We also have ongoing meetups that we'll drill into more detail, and we'll get that information to you. The webinar today may seem a bit more technical than our usual assessment, tax, and land records webinars, but we wanted to do this so you can get started right away. Now I'm going to pass this over to JD. If you've attended one of these webinars in the past, you'll be familiar with JD and what a great resource he is. All right, JD, passing over to you.
All right, thanks, Brent. It's great to be here with all of you today. I'm going to be spending the rest of the time on today's webinar showing you how to configure dashboards with your assessment data. I'm going to talk about Operations Dashboard for ArcGIS. This is an out-of-the-box browser-based application that you can use on your desktop or tablet to author and view dashboards. It's built with the ArcGIS API for JavaScript and can provide you with key insights into your data on a single screen. So you can see a few examples that we have here. So the one on the far left has some assessment data, and this is what we refer to as our value analysis dashboard. And this is primarily the one that we're going to be focusing in on throughout the rest of the presentation. So a dashboard allows you to monitor assets, events, or activities for what we call at-a-glance decision making. Provides support for real-time data, allowing users to see dynamic updates as they're made. Dashboards are created with a configurable user experience, and there's no programming that has to be done. So as I mentioned earlier, it's web-based and it's built on the JavaScript API, but more importantly, it's closely integrated with ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Enterprise 10.6.1. So in more technical terms, Operations Dashboard offers many ready-to-use visualizations, and it works with this new dashboard item type in your online organization or your enterprise portal. So you can configure a very interactive dashboard experience with actions and selectors that are all accessible in the browser. For example, you can configure a dashboard that enables the display of key performance indicators, or what we call KPIs, such as sales and sales ratios, appeals, foreclosures, and even summarized data based on assessment neighborhoods. So in other words, aggregating data within a neighborhood like the number of sales, number of appeals, changes in assessed value since the last assessment, and just about any other KMA variables you can think of. So some of you are probably aware that Operations Dashboard has been around for a while with ArcGIS. However, it's important to note in today's webinar that I'm going to be covering the new web-based app that's been completely re-engineered and was released with ArcGIS Online about a few months ago in December of 2017. So I won't be covering the original Windows desktop version of Operations Dashboard that's now in mature support if you still have that one installed. So how do you get Operations Dashboard? Well, it's included with ArcGIS Online as part of your organization, and it's updated quarterly with the online releases. The recent summer 2018 update now extends dashboard support to smartphones. So for those of you that have ArcGIS Enterprise, Operations Dashboard was released as an enhancement to Enterprise 10.6, and you can download that installer from my Esri. Operations Dashboard is now included in the box with the recent release of ArcGIS Enterprise 10.6.1 and will now be part of the portal deployment, and it will continue that way from now on. So next we'll be getting into the details on the capabilities of how the dashboards work and how they're configured. So to begin with, we've briefly discussed how you get access to it. Let's take a look at the architecture. So an Operations Dashboard is driven by a supporting web map. And that web map is authored with your operational feature layers or web layers. In the assessor's office, these might be sales, foreclosures, appeals, assessment neighborhoods, and of course, tax parcels joined or merged with your property characteristics from your KMA system. So you author a dashboard that leverages these feature layers to see in one view all the data that you need to be informed to make better decisions. So these feature layers are powered as services that funnel into the web map and then eventually leveraged by the Operations Dashboard itself. So now let's move on and look at some of the key functionality of of the capabilities within the operations dashboard. So it includes a lot of built-in functionality with ready-to-use data visualizations. Some of these are obvious, like a map or a map legend, but others might need a little explanation if you're new to authoring dashboards. Let's take a look at some of the examples. So starting at the top, in the list of elements, whenever you're authoring a new dashboard, we have a header which can be added at the top. It can include things like a title, your branding, logos, URLs, etc. And you can also add selectors to the header, but we'll cover that a little bit later. Next is the left panel, and a left panel is an optional pop-out window that you can add selectors to do simple things like filter contents of the dashboard. So it's an interactive way for you to add filtering to the dashboard itself. So next we have a map. So like I said, that's pretty obvious. Next we have a serial chart, and this serial chart is, this one actually is showing the sales by month and by year, and it's being labeled actually with counts on them to show you how many sales there were. So next we have a list, and so there's two examples of a list on this particular dashboard. The small list on the left is a list of features of sales. So these are just an individual listing of the sales. The one on the right is actually the assessment neighborhoods and some brief summaries about each of the neighborhoods. So what was the total value of all the properties, how many sales are in that particular neighborhood over a given period, etc. Next, we have a details panel that you can add. It's similar to just basically housing the pop-up window for an individual feature or an individual selection on the dashboard. So just a comprehensive list of the attributes of a given feature. So that was looking at a pattern of use where you're looking at some sales, foreclosures, and appeals data. This next one is another type of workflow where you might be monitoring work that's happening in the organization. So to look at a couple of other different example elements, we have a different dashboard. So there's a pie chart here, and this particular pie chart is just referencing the field appraisers and their workloads that are happening as they're out in the field. So it's listing out their name, the percentage of work they've gotten completed. The next type is an indicator, and this is basically just a count of the number of features for a specific attribute. So if we were to look at this particular set of indicators, there's 4 that have been added, and I simply added 1 for each of the unique values of a field called appraisal status. So for the work that's going on the field, I can see there's 6 that are assigned, 38 have been completed, 16 are open, and 10 are considered pending. So maybe there was a fence they couldn't get behind, or there was a dog that was chasing them out of the yard. Who knows what the reason, but these are, just they haven't finished these yet. So if you want to monitor dynamic data, so such as with a dashboard like this where the points are constantly changing, or the data is being constantly updated, the source web map that you have, you go into the layers that you want to update and save the web map with a refresh interval. So this is going to refresh every 10 seconds. So once you establish that in the map, the dashboard is just automatically going to ask for new data every 10 seconds or whatever you set that refresh interval to, so that the latest data is immediately going to start to become available to whoever's viewing and using that dashboard. So some other capabilities to look at. So it's not just about a static view of the data. There's also interactions that you want to do, or you want to add tools to make these elements talk to each other or cross-filter the dashboard. So we'll look at some good examples of that coming up in just a minute when I start walking you through how to build your first dashboard. So dashboards really allow you to present data in intuitive and compelling ways, maybe for people that aren't really that familiar with a map, but need to quickly discern information and make decisions from that data. So the things that you can include inside your dashboards are things that come directly from the ArcGIS platform, things like feature services or web layers. If you want to incorporate real-time data, you want to, coordination of work, you can have feature layers that, monitor the locations of people's devices. So feature tracking or location tracking, ArcGIS servers, and you can also include online content and services in your dashboards as well. So another thing to consider with an operations dashboard is that you can have this set up to basically control the full suite of ArcGIS apps within the organization. So everything from edits that are happening in the desktop, those can be connected to services that can be monitored in the dashboard. Workforce activities, things that are captured in the field, such as surveys or using Selector as data is updated and posted and synced back to the source feature services, those can easily be monitored and tracked within the dashboard. So it's a way to have a real-time monitoring, a way for you to keep track of key performance indicators, and it's also a way of you to have app pairing or integration of multiple apps really and have these all work together. So how do you create a dashboard? Well, there's actually about 4 different ways to create them, but one of the easiest is when you sign into your enterprise portal or into ArcGIS Online and click on the app switcher. And so you click on the app switcher, operations dashboard is there, and that will create an empty dashboard. So from there, you can start adding your elements such as a map and other elements, and you can configure these elements to have actions and selectors throughout. So now let's actually kind of step into this and see how it really works. And so I'll go through and set this up. So one of the things that I talked about was creating a dashboard from the home page. So I'm going to show you basically a shortcut. And another way is that you're going to have a web map that's going to be the source or the basis for your particular dashboard. So this is a map, and if you look at the legend, if we start at the top and kind of unpeel the layers here, the sales or individual sales. At the bottom, you can see that this is time enabled over a certain time period. This next layer is basically a heat map rendering of the sales, just kind of showing me a very rude density map of where the clustering of the sales is happening. The next layer are the assessment neighborhoods, and these are actually being color-coded based on the number of sales that are within the neighborhoods. And then lastly, we have the tax districts that are here. And at the very bottom, we actually have a custom base map that has our authoritative parcel data in it. So you can combine all of these things together to create a very interactive dashboard with all of your data in it. So to do that, I can go to the share panel once I have the map authored and click on this create web app option. And then under the web app option, if I go to the top here, I've got operations dashboard as one of the options. So I'm using ArcGIS Online for this demonstration. So you should be able to follow right along with this, this recording afterwards. So now my dashboard is actually being created, and what we're going to see is my map element is already pre-configured. So this basically saves me a step of having to create an empty dashboard, add a map, and then configure it. So let's just move right on to the configuration part of the map. So there's a series of settings that I can set up here, bookmarks, show me the legend. I want to control layer visibility. I want to be able to change base maps. I want to be able to search, maybe geocode, use my parcel number to do a search. and then obviously window in and out of this. There's a number of things we could do with map actions if I chose. Whenever the map extent changes, I want to filter this based on some criteria. So I want to cut down on the number of features that are displayed, etc. So you can go in afterwards and experiment with some of these other settings. I'm just going to go with some very basic ones at this point. So now I'm going to go through and do some configuration of this dashboard. So the first type of element I'm going to add is details, and I want to get details about sales. And so you can see in this little configuration dialog here, if I scroll down to the bottom, we can see the full pop-up and see we've got a comparison of the assessed value versus the sale amount, and then we see that the sales ratio is actually being displayed here. So I'm just going to click done. There's a number of things I could change here with colors and titles and so forth, but I'm just going to go ahead and just take the defaults on this, and so I can interactively resize these for my end user. So if I'm going to have a bunch of people viewing this that have very different form factors, so for example, some people might have double monitors, they may have small monitors, they may have big monitors, etc. I can come into the dashboard settings and allow the users to actually resize these elements themselves. And this was recently added to the dashboard with the summer update. So now let's continue to add some capabilities here. The next thing I'm going to add is a list, and this list is going to just create a listing of the features in the sales layer. So here I can format this using a particular expression. So what shows up beside the entries, so we'll probably want to say something like the site address, and we'll say sold on, and we'll put in the transaction date. We'll put on the next line and then we'll put in what the sale amount was. So we'll go down here and select that. And so you can see this pop-up is actually building. If I want to put a $ in front of this, and I'll highlight this and I'll make this bold and some of these other things bold so that they stand out in that window. So you can see that we've started building some capabilities here to make this really easy to read and navigate. But I want to build some interactivity with this. So what I need to do is add an action. And so whenever a selection is made, I want it to actually filter that details panel to only show the one that I select. So I'm going to click OK. And one of the things that I can do with these widgets is as they start to get added, I can move these guys around and reposition them. I can stack them on top of each other or put them underneath. So you start to get the idea of how we can dock these. So now what we should start to see is when I select one of these in the list, the details is only showing me one feature in this particular dashboard. So as I change the selection, that's going to be updated at the bottom. I can scroll down here and look at this. So there's some other things I can do with configuring this. So one of those might be in the actions. Let's don't just filter the details, but let's actually pan to that location, and we want to use the map to do that, and we want to flash that feature on the map as well. And so now whenever I click on one of those, it centers me on that and it flashes it on the screen. So now we're starting to gain some momentum. We're starting to build a dashboard that has a little bit of capability. So at any time we can look at the capabilities of the map. I can change the base map if I want to. I can control the layers. So maybe I don't want to see this density all the time. I can interact with that and turn layers on and off. So the next thing I want to add here is an indicator. And so what I'm going to do with the indicator is just show the number of sales that are happening So this is just a total of all the features that are in the layer. So I might want to just add some text to this. I might want to add, you know, an icon that describes these. So there's, looks like a for sale sign. Maybe I want to change this to be a little smaller, or I might want to change the colors of these. So now the indicator has actually been added. So again, I'm going to continue to build some capabilities. I'm going to stack this inside here. So I could do things like click on this and say summary. And I can change the order with a simple drag and drop of this. So now we see we've got an indicator that's keeping track of the number of features. So the next thing I want to do is add another element type, and we'll add in a gauge for this. And so the gauge is going to be from the sales layer. And what we want to do with the gauge is we want to use a statistic. And what we want to do is we want to get the assessed value. And for the maximum, I'm going to use a statistic, and I'm going to use a sum again. And the reason I'm using sum here is where I'm headed with this is I'm only going to have one selected at a time. So whatever the sum is going to be equal to the value that I get from that field. So I'm going to get sale amount. So assessed value divided by sale amount is going to give us a ratio. So now we can see the values are actually populating the gauge, but we want to go over to the actual gauge and change some parameters. So I like the way this is showing me progress, but let's show it as a half donut. And I want to show this as a percentage instead of the actual calculations. So now we can start to see that I've got a dashboard that has some interactivity here with the sales ratio. So let's add some thresholds. So maybe you have a target ratio between 30 and 50%. So if it's below 30, we'll make this kind of a dark red color. If it's 50 up to 50, that'll be within our range. So I'll make this kind of a green color. And then if it's well over 50, we'll maybe make this a bright red color and say done here. And so now we've got the gauge, and so it's added to my dashboard, but it's reading right now just whatever the first feature is in the sales layer. So I need to go back to my list, and in the list, I need to go down to the actions, and I want it to actually filter my gauge for the value and for the maximum value so that it only reads the one that's selected. So I'm going to click done. So now whenever I click on a feature, my map is going to zoom and it's going to report the sales ratio for that one feature on the map. So now we've got interactivity between multiple widgets. So I could take this and actually stack this on this group right here. So whenever I do a selection, I can look at the details, then I can look at the gauge and look at the sales ratio for that particular feature. So the next thing I want to add in here is actually a left panel so we can start doing some filtering. So if I go to the left panel, we can see that this is added obviously on the left side. I can configure this a couple of ways. I can have it be a slide over, which means that it's an optional. So you can basically educate your users that whenever they want to get to the panel, they can see it. And when they don't want to use it, it's not there. So they have control over that. So I'm going to add some capabilities to the selector. So I'm going to go and I'm going to add in a category selector. And so what I'm going to do with this is I'm actually going to add in a set of features, and I'm going to use the neighborhoods for this. And for the neighborhoods, I'm going to list out let's say up to maybe 200. And I'm going to add a filter just so that the list isn't really big. So I'm going to filter this on the number of sales that is equal to, greater than or equal to, let's say 10. And so this is showing me the actual values from the layer itself. So I'm just going to pick 10 from this list just so that it doesn't give me a giant list that's out of control. So I'll click OK there. So now what I can do is when I select from this one of these guys from this list, I can make it interact. So let's go and let's configure this guy under the actions so that what it does is it pans to that location on the map, it flashes that neighborhood on the map, and it filters my list so that the list only shows me the sales that are within that particular neighborhood using the neighborhood code as an attribute. If I don't have these codes in my data, I can actually use the spatial filtering, so it'll do a select within operation. So I apply that. So now I pick one of these neighborhoods, it flashes that neighborhood, I get the list updated. So I'm going to actually click this pin so that this stays here. And now if I go back to the summary, I need to actually filter the summary as well. So let's go to our actions. Let's go to we want to filter the indicator, and we want to filter the indicator based on values that have the same neighborhood code. So now we see that for this neighborhood, we have 15 sales. We see the list. If I want to know what's happening for that one sale, I click on that. There's the details. There's the sales ratio. So now we've actually started to see how we can get a lot of interactivity with this. Let's add one more selector to this list. Let me just, to kind of clean this up, we'll just say neighborhood, spelling counts. Okay, there we go. All right, so there's our neighborhoods. I'm going to add another selector, and this one we're going to use for dates. So you might want to select date ranges. So my data is kind of old, so I'm going to use a date picker, and I'm going to use a range, and I'm going to set it to 1/1/2004 for the beginning. And then for the end, I'm going to set the end to be 1/1/2008. So that's the time window of this data set that I have. So for the actions, whenever these dates are selected, I want to filter the sales layer, and we want to filter that based on transaction date. I might also want to filter the list based on the transaction date, and I might want to also filter the indicator based on transaction date. So now we've got a date range. Let's go back to the summary. So I probably am going to want to, on this category selector of the neighborhoods, add a none option so that if not one, so that it gives people the option to see them all. So now this is set back to none. We've got our date ranges here. So let me just change the date to be, 1/5/2004, and we'll see if that updates our indicator. So now there's only 3 sales in that time frame. So let's move this out to be December of 2004. So now you can start to see how you can incorporate many aspects of the dashboard to interact together. So one last thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go into the actions on these neighborhoods, and I'm actually going to get this to filter the neighborhoods themselves. So now when a neighborhood is selected, that's the only data I see on the map is the data for that neighborhood. So as the neighborhood changes, we're going to see only that one is actually filtered. So just lots of ways to create some very powerful display capabilities using the dashboard. So I want to conclude this webinar here with a couple more things. So some of you may be familiar with our solutions that we have, solutions.arcgis.com. We have a tool called the Solutions Deployment Tool that runs in ArcGIS Pro. And this is a very good way to help you discover solution offerings. And it's also a very quick way for you to deploy the services, maps, and configurable apps that are available in the land records category. So on the right side of the screen here, I have a screenshot of the deployment tool, and I've typed in the filter land records to show me only the applications that are available for land records, or it's been filtered. One of those at the bottom is the value analysis dashboard. So what that does is you could use this tool to deploy a dashboard that's completely pre-configured with all the widgets almost identically the same way as you saw me update those just now. So how this tool actually works is you sign in to your organization, you set up the groups, you create the functional groups, then you use the deployment tool to log into the organization, you figure out which solution you want to deploy, you deploy that solution, then you configure it. So within the application, it's going to create all the elements needed. It's going to create the services. It's going to create the dashboard item, the web map needed, the feature layers. And then finally, what you can do is load your data into those feature layers. And that can all be done within ArcGIS Pro in the same step. So I'm going to open up Pro, and we see here that I've got some data, some sales, foreclosures, appeals, assessment neighborhoods. I already have that data. So if you download the Solutions Deployment Tool for ArcGIS Pro, you install that add-in, you go to Share, you go to Solutions, and that'll open up the tasks. So the first task is going to have you sign into the active portal. So for me, I have an enterprise portal local that I'm going to set up as my active portal. So the first step in the task is to sign in. The next step is to pick a solution to deploy. So I might want to say value analysis. So here's that particular solution, and the green check mark on the right indicates that that solution has already been deployed within my organization. So I could, once I hit deploy, I can move on to the next step. But if I hover over this solution and I click learn more, that's actually going to take me to the direct solution and describe exactly how it works and how what you need to get it set up and running. So let's view that application. So there is a try it live version of this that you can play around with. So if you recall, back in the demonstration that I did, I set up a series of elements. The first was an indicator, which is the summary. These are all stacked on top of each other. There's the list, there's the sales ratio, and there's the detail for any sale that I choose to pick. So that exact same configuration you saw me build within the presentation is exactly how this dashboard is set up. So here's the left panel. Here's the neighborhoods that are in the data. I select a neighborhood, it zooms in, it filters the data, it filters the sales, it filters the list, and so forth to the individual features. Now, in my dashboard, I really didn't drill in far enough to show you the actual thematic legend, but you can also create the legend based on your assessed value and look for outliers in the assessments, etc. Here's another way to configure the date selections. So if your data is more current, like this particular data set is, you can configure this to say last week, the last month, the last 6 months, last year. So, you know, there's lots of different ways that you can configure your dashboards to work in your organization. So using ArcGIS Pro is one of the fastest ways to deploy that particular solution. And this is actually the results of what you're going to get. So a couple of concluding thoughts here. So I mentioned earlier that the operations dashboard is going to be updated quarterly. So with the latest update, we've enhanced the online version of the dashboard so that you can change some settings. So element resize is one of the new things. Why is that important? Well, it's important because it actually helped us extend these capabilities to smartphones and tablets. Now, you're probably going to want to author your dashboard more carefully if you're going to be providing those capabilities on devices, but there are very good blog articles out there. There's one listed here. Later, I can post this in the chat window and make that available so that you guys can read about that. So this is an example here. I've got a little recording inside of this PowerPoint of some usability things. So they tapped on one of the maximize widgets. So they tapped on the feed down at the bottom that gave them the list. There's the left panel on the phone. There's some category selectors that are there. So they can interact with those, change the type. So show me the ones that are, you know, the accidents. So I think you get the idea of some of the capabilities and how you could extend those to a different form factor. Now, you might need to create a couple of different dashboards, one for the office use and one for phones, but very exciting capabilities there for extending these to a lot of different places. So I'll also leave you with a number of other resources. We'll probably post these links in the meetup. You could take a screenshot of this as well. A lot of these are pretty short. So there's the documentation. We have a GeoNet community specifically for operations dashboard. If you want to get to the solution site, you can get there. If you have ideas on making the dashboard better, we've got links for that. There is a live training seminar that was done that is very detailed about creating dashboards. So if you're new to it and you want more information about getting started, and if you want to interact with that dashboard team, you can do that through this email address. So that is primarily what I had to cover. So I wanted to leave a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. And so on behalf of Brent and myself, thank you guys for attending. I'm glad you guys were able to join us today. So in the chat window, if you can send your questions there, that would be great.
Yeah, nicely done, JD. We do have a couple of questions. One attendee is interested in having their assessment data updated live and in real time. Can you explain the process of getting that done?
Okay, well, as far as the connectivity, your services would need to be connected to the databases directly. So that would more than likely mean that if you wanted this to be completely real time, you would need to use ArcGIS Enterprise for your dashboards and have that connected directly to whatever the relational database is that you use to support your operations. And you could do that through a join or a table view, etc. But it would need to be part of a map service that's directly communicating with the data.
All right, JD, can you go back to the last screen, please, that has the resources listed on it? I don't think everybody got a screenshot of that. That'd be good to leave up. Cool. All right, there's a, hold on a second here. Do you support joined tables? I think Catherine's answering that one as well, but you might want to answer that too, JD.
Yeah, I mean, again, as far as joins, I think it just depends on the concurrency model that you want to have. So if the join needs to be a live link type, then you'd probably need to use Enterprise and publish a dynamic map service or a feature layer through a view in order to do that. But you could join that to a static table or static feature class that's updated a few hours a day, a week, weekly, monthly, something to that effect.
All right, can you build a query layers in ArcGIS Pro? In ArcMap, you can add them from File, Add Data, Add Query Layer. I'm trying to add data from a database. I don't know if you can see those questions or not, JD.
Yeah, I mean, all of these questions I'll go back to and I'll contact folks individually on these, and but I don't know if I can address that one in this context. I mean, I think I'll need to follow up on that one with more details.
Okay. When I've used join tables within a service, I'm no longer able to get statistics from it. Is there a reason for that?
Join tables and statistics. I don't know why you're trying to generate the statistics from. I mean, I think we'll have to take this one offline too. I need to get more into the details on that.
Okay. This is a good question. Is ArcPro parcel fabric friendly?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you should be able to take, your fabric, take your camo data, join those together, write feature classes that can be put into web maps and leveraged. Yes. I mean, we have actually tools included with the tax parcel editing solution that will create a tax publishing layer that you can serve out and use for things like this dashboard.
Okay, there's some more detail on the table and feature class question and statistics. I don't know if can you see those, JD?
Yeah, I
Okay.
can't see them in presentation mode.
Okay. Let's see. Will the slides be available after the presentation? Yeah, we'll make a recording of the presentation that everyone can have access to.
Yeah, I'll actually publish the slides as a note page format, so pretty much all the detail about what I said is in there too, and it's not just a bunch of pictures.
All right. Does Operations Dashboard support ArcGIS Arcade?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Well, actually, back in the web map, there's a couple of arcade things that are actually happening. One of them is some coloring. So if I go out on the sales and I look at the pop-up window, there's a little bar that's being colored in based on some expressions. So if you deployed this particular solution and you went actually to the web map itself, the web map that gets deployed has an expression built into the pop-up. So go to configure the pop-up, and then if you look down in the configuration details, there's a couple of expressions in there that you could build. So pretty much anything you can do with Arcade in your pop-up window, you can include into this. Now, there's also some work the operations dashboard team did with our public safety group, where they included Arcade actually in the symbolization of the feature. So for example, there was they were working with the crime guys, and they had the symbols on the map change colors based on their time stamp. So the newer ones were red and they faded to green as the times get older. And it was all dynamically done. And I'm pretty sure there's a blog article that was written about that, or they may have published something on the GeoNet space about it. But yeah, Arcade is very powerful, and you can definitely include it into dashboards.
All right, I think that's it for questions. We'll give the attendees just another second if they've got something pressing to type in.
Okay, yeah, and I'll get a hold of these questions, and I'll follow up individually with folks as soon as we get off here.
Yeah. All right, well, that's going to wrap it up. I want to thank everyone for attending, and I certainly want to thank JD for an excellent presentation. We're available to answer specific questions and directly, and also please look forward to the next upcoming webinars. In our follow-up to this webinar, we will send you the links to the upcoming webinars, as well as the land records meetup and the assessment and tax meetup as well. So with that, we're going to call it a wrap. And again, thank you all very much.